Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me again for another speed paint. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the history of this particular speed paint because the illustration that I'm doing this week of these 3 flying books is actually a repaint of an illustration I did in 2021, and it's the one that I'm now shown on screen. This illustration originally was me experimenting with monster illustrations to put together a 5e D&D monster supplemental. I have since defunct that project just because I haven't had the time to really put together the 30 illustrations I had planned, and I've moved to oil painting since then, but I decided to revisit this particular piece for a couple of reasons. One, I've always loved books, and I've always loved this particular piece I've done of these flying books. And the other one is that I thought it would be a nice, safe way for me to practice painting on ampersand gessoboard. Now, normally I am an oil on stretched canvas, or as of more recently, oil on stretched linen painter, but a lot of people have been telling me that gessoboard is a great surface to work with when you want really smooth scans of your art for stuff like a possible monster book if I ever decided to get back to it. So I thought I would take this piece. This is a direct transfer from the original digital illustration onto gessoboard. I'm going to be a little bit more liberal with my colors just to kind of see how I've come along in the last 5 years. And as I did with my previous painting, I'm starting this one with a grisaille just to help me establish the color tones and my values before I move into color. But I just thought it would be nice to sort of revisit an old friend, see how well I can do on it today, and I suppose for now what I'll let you do is enjoy this lovely grisaille process, and like with the last video, I will pick up with you guys once we get to color. Now, as I mentioned for this particular piece, this is a repainting of a monster book idea that I had, and these flying books were the first in that series. I decided to start up here with this tiny little book here, which is going to be painted red. I went with the 3 primary colors for this piece because I thought it was a really nice, simple way of using both red, green, and blue when I was in the computer. Now it's a great primary study here on the gesso board. You can see me working here with extraordinarily tiny brushes that are way smaller than I'm used to working. One of the things that I wanted to do when I worked on this piece is start to work more closely with tiny brushes and more attention to detail in these pieces and not work with broad brush strokes as much as I have been. So I decided to take that opportunity here to really dial in my brushes, dial in my size, and really get those details painted in. And it was fun, for sure, and also extraordinarily frustrating. Now, I was mentioning about how this is a dungeon or a D&D 5th edition monster. As much as the book itself is probably now defunct, I have decided that in the description below, if this is a piece of art that you would like to use, or a monster you would like to use in your campaign, I have put the monster table thingy. I have put down the stat blocks for this monster in the comment section below, or in the video description below, so you can go ahead and use it, and feel free to use this art on your table to show off this particular piece. Of course, I do have prints of this art available if you want to have an actual print available and to help support, you know, us young and budding artists. But like I said, I just wanted to kind of release the stat block for this into the wild and hope you all enjoy using this little tiny flying book set. Flying books, I mentioned that books are kind of important to me. I tend to think of myself as a book nerd, but also not in a way. And I remember one of the things with me and flying books is that I always had this imagination of being able to read a book that sort of, but without having to hold it in my hand. I always had this idea of levitating books in front of me. And then when I started doing dungeon mastering, I always had this secondary thought of, well, what if we had these books that had the ability to levitate that lost the person who made them have that ability, and thus they decided to start attacking people, which is where this whole concept came from in the first place. It was back then one of my cooler concepts. It was part of one of my early campaigns where my characters visited an ancient library and had to actually battle these flying books in order to get the particular book they needed to continue their quests, which is where the whole idea came from in the first place. This illustration itself, both the digital and the traditional illustration, was my real first attempt at kind of creature design in a sense, and it's simple. It's 3 books flying at you, but I thought it actually worked really well. Now, I did mention that this was my test for ampersand gesso board. This was also a test in a completely unrelated vein for making stickers out of oil paint. I made a number of stickers out of my old digital illustrations for monster art, and what I decided to do was paint this again in oils to see how I could translate my monster illustration techniques and just object illustration techniques to oil painted stickers. So I've ordered the stickers. They won't really ever go on my online shop. I think stickers and keychains and pins are always going to be a thing that are exclusive to my conventions, mainly just because for me right now, the logistics of shipping them is a bit tricky, but if that ever changes, keep checking my shop, which is linked again in the description below. If I ever put them up there, they will be there. But yeah, I decided that it would be a great way to return to the original illustration that I did for my first sticker test, my first monster tests, and in a way it was nice to work with a piece that I really understood from a composition and from an angle, I suppose, of knowing what I want out of the painting, so I could really practice the technique and use it to practice the product manufacturing side of being an artist. But I will say, just I want to really quickly interject here, these tiny black lines to show cracks in the pages on those blocks of text was an interesting challenge working, especially because I like to work wet on wet when it comes to these kinds of paintings, because you can get all this beautiful blending that is really hard to get dry or wet on dry. But I just wanted to highlight that I was really proud of how those came out, because I thought they looked really well and they thought they looked really natural. But yeah, this was definitely a piece that I enjoyed. It was definitely a piece I was happy to revisit. In terms of whether or not I'll continue painting on gessoboard, I have a few other paintings already lined up to be painted on gessoboard, so I'm definitely going to have at least 3 or 4 more. There is a painting that is a commission right now, which will be a video that comes out 5 or 6 months from now, just because of the time of... well, there's an agreement that I won't share that video until the recipient has received that particular commission. But yeah, so I'll be doing gessoboard paintings in the future, and I think though, after all this, that I'm still an oil on linen girl. I don't think I'll ever be able to truly move 100% gessoboard, but I will say that, you know, when it comes down to it, sometimes art is about what it's going to be used for. So I'm at least proud to say that I can do a painting on gessoboard should it ever come up in the future. And there's not really much else to say about that. I was really proud of this piece. I was really proud of how it came out, despite the fact that you're about to see me struggle here with this and redo it entirely, which is the other reason I like working on wet, because you can blend stuff out like that and completely redo it. But yeah, I will happily leave you with the remainder of this time lapse, and I will catch you guys at the end to talk a bit about the finished piece, and we'll check back in. We're about wrapping up on this particular illustration. Here is the finished piece. I hope you all like it, and I hope you all enjoyed watching me repaint this old illustration of mine. You can see here all some of that lovely texture on gessoboard, which presents very differently from texture here. And just as a quick reference, here is the original digital illustration that I did in 2021. And here is the scan of this particular piece rendered in 2025. Thank you all for joining me. I hope to see you guys at the next video. And until then, peace out.